Chad, the discussion a lot throughout the big portion of the college basketball season has included Rick Pitino, and for good reason at St. John's. And right now, today, St. John's is a part of the NCAA tournament discussion because, well, they're left out of the field of 68. And here's Rick Pitino reacting to his team not making the postseason tournament.
I mean, with 32 in the net. Well, first of all, I think we all should probably never mention that word again because I think it's fraudulent. You know, my son was 25 in the net, and he was saying he wasn't in with 25 wins. So I think the net's something that shouldn't even be mentioned anymore. I think that we had a good strength of schedule. Ken Palm, why mention him? We were 26 in Ken Palm. So I don't know. It's we tried to play a tough schedule. We tried to do things the right way, and we didn't get in. But, you know, I never make excuses. I respect the committee for what they do. They give their time. They give their energy to it. They didn't think that we measured up to their standards, and we'll take it very positively like men and move forward. We're not going to gripe. We're not going to say we got screwed. We're not going to. None of that helps. Bitterness does not help. I've had enough bitterness in my life to last a lifetime.
There's Rick Pitino, who I really enjoy hearing from and enjoy the job that he does in coaching, period. Chad, in this case, he's coaching a team that's not even a part of the first four out of this bracket. He's coaching a team that he was brutally honest about, not ripping, but honest about in a discussion, much like he just had there, saying they weren't that good, they weren't that athletic, they didn't possess lateral quickness or toughness or maybe the ability to actually have the longevity of a basketball career. Snubbed, you can look at Oklahoma or Seton Hall or specifically Indiana State. You mentioned the net. 28 is the highest net ranking ever by a team that missed the tournament. That would be Indiana State, not St. John's. And given the fact that, well, St. John's doesn't want to be a part of any postseason tournament, and we predicted this whenever he had the comments about his team, that he was not enjoying coaching. I'm not surprised that in a brutal, honest way, the committee felt the same way about Pitino's team as he did, saying they're not a postseason tournament team.
Yeah, look, we should be hearing from Josh Schertz. That's the coach at Indiana State, because he's the guy who really got screwed in this whole thing. And I don't know that it's Rick Pitino. I understand the frustration with the numbers, and the net rankings.
That's all we hear about.
It is the NCAA guidance tool for the selection committee. It's right there in the description. The NCAA, it's an NCAA-formed algorithm to help them rank teams 1 through 68. So if you're in the 30s or the 20s, like Indiana State at 28, odds are you're feeling pretty good about your chances to make the NCAA tournament. So when that doesn't happen, I totally understand the frustration from Rick Pitino or others. Now, the John Feinsteins of the world are not going to cry crocodile tears over Rick Pitino or over Oklahoma or over Seton Hall. He will over Indiana State, who's in the Missouri Valley Conference, a mid-major school. And most of America will do the same thing because they get upset over the mid-major that does not get in as the at-large when some power conference schools get in ahead of them. Rick Pitino kind of would have fallen into that category, although the Big East, which you would think about as a power basketball conference, you know how many teams they got in the tournament? Three of the top 10 overall seeds in the tournament, mind you, when you look at UConn, Marquette, and Creighton. 3 of the top 10, but not a single other Big East school was worthy. Not Seton Hall, not Providence, not Rick Pitino's St. John's team. That is a little bit odd. I love Rick Pitino in this elder statesman category that he's fallen into, where he is brutally honest. He is a guy who has nothing left to lose, and he's going to tell you exactly where you stand, where he stands, where his team stands at all times. He said, I've had enough bitterness to last a lifetime. I'm not going to be bitter about this. We're going to move on and thank them for their service and coming up with the bracket and try to handle it positively. I respect everything that Rick Pitino had to say about this. The NCAA tournament is better with Rick Pitino in it. Let me also say that just from an outsider's perspective, a fan's perspective of what I would like to see. But we could do this every year with a number of teams. Indiana State had claim to one of those spots. They could argue. I think Providence did. I think Wake Forest and others did. I don't understand how Virginia is in the tournament, quite frankly, other than they've won a national title recently, and Tony Bennett's a great guy that everybody likes. I don't understand them in over some other teams.
Well, they're 56th, for instance, in the net.
Yeah. And I'm looking at it yesterday, and I was really looking at some of the different resumes, and I want to say it was Providence. Mm-hmm. Providence is something like 9-5 against quad one teams. Okay, to put that in perspective, I think Tennessee was 9-6. Now, Providence also had 3 or 4 quad 4 losses. Tennessee had 0. But Tennessee is the number 5 overall seed, and Providence is snubbed, left out with that many quad 1 wins. You can see where the committee picks and chooses what they like and what
Michigan
arguments
State.
they want to make. Michigan State is another good example. A very uneven season, 19-14 on the regular season, but Tom Izzo, great tournament coach, and people are going to have them in the Sweet 16 knocking off North Carolina in the second round, I'm sure, in their brackets. So I can see Rick Pitino's frustration. I think we could point to a number of teams and show where there should be some frustration also.
And I'm always frustrated with how they seed teams based on potential matchups as you go along the way, first and second round. But specifically, this committee, I urge those college basketball fans, media, don't take the bait for expanding the tournament, which is exactly what I believe it's set up to be. Because, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, what was the criteria for Sankey when it came to expanding the tournament and how many automatic bids he wanted the SEC to have? It was like 12, I believe, of the top 50
I think he
net.
said if you look at the...
If you're in the top 50.
Yeah, he said maybe... Yeah, I think 12 was the number. 12 of our SEC schools are in the top 50. And he said, you just can't tell me those 12 schools aren't going to be better equipped to compete in the tournament as opposed to some of these automatic qualifiers.
I mean, look at the storyline that they've set up with we need more teams in because you leave St. John's out. You have the coaches, even the coaches from the Big East who are in the tournament are speaking out on behalf of the 3 that did not break down that door. You have the Power 2, Power 3 conferences. Michigan and Virginia get in. Michigan State and Virginia get in. Meanwhile, you're looking at, for instance, Nevada, who went 6-6 against the Quad 1, and they're at, a 10 seed in this? You have Indiana State that finished with the best net ranking to not get in the tournament. And we have Seton Hall. Chad, they become the first team in league play to finish 5 games above 500 in league play and not get in to the NCAA tournament. You're going to have all of this chirping about, well, this is why we need to expand the tournament. We need more teams in because these teams that everyone's clamoring about, when not much discussion was being had about the vast majority of them until yesterday, I think the committee set it up to be a perfect argument on behalf of those that want to expand what is already perfect. And that's my issue with this entire bracket format is I think by and large, I don't have much issue or don't take issue with the way this bracket looks and sets up, except for the examples that you can point to and specifically note, well, this big brand got in and who didn't? Indiana State.
Yeah, it's funny to me to think about what is the threshold for how people can legitimately get angry about something. Because we're at 68 right now, and we're talking about St. John's, Indiana State, Providence, Seton Hall, maybe Oklahoma, maybe Wake Forest. There are some other ones that may have some legitimate beefs with the selection committee.
Maybe Pittsburgh. I think they were in the first 4.
Pittsburgh is another one that was right there that didn't get in. But usually you just counter that and say, you had your chances.
Yeah.
There are 68 teams. But is that number 80 now? That we're not going to be bitching about teams 80 through 90? Where they're not going to be, going on shows and telling everyone why they should have been in the tournament. I think you could move that target to any one numerical spot, and you're still going to argue about the last 5 or 6 teams that got in over 5 or 6 teams that didn't get in. So knowing that, just keep it where it is right now. Keep it the same.
That's what I want.
The
I
other
think
big
the talking
argument to
points,
it,
though, are setting up for the expansion.
The other big argument, Hutton, is that they're going to keep coming back to is I think the last time they expanded to 68, there were something like 305 Division I schools.
Yeah.
And now there's like 370.
And
so they're saying this is still the same
thing.
percentage, right? Yeah, we're going to get the same percentage. There's just more Division I teams now. You can make any argument you want that's explaining the exact same thing about what this is about. It's about money. It's about money and nothing else. They want to expand it because they want more money. And Greg Sankey and other conference commissioners want more of their teams in the tournament because more of their teams want to be in the tournament. They're fighting on behalf of their conference, their membership, and the almighty dollar. Yep. And they're going to keep arguing that until it happens. Don't let them convince you it's the right thing to do because what we have right now is perfect.
Yes. And, I mean, this is a 24-hour news headline for sports because we have the tournament starting on Tuesday.
No one's going to think a thing at all about St. John's come Thursday.
Chad, I wish I would think about these conference tournaments the way I do the football conference championship games, like the SEC, Big Ten, and more, because it should matter much more. It does matter if you're a team on the bubble and you make the run and you win your conference tournament. NC State, 5 wins, 5 days. And
had to get it.
And had to get it. But in the case of, an example would be Auburn. How are they a 4 seed? They're a top 5 team in Ken Palm, or in net, I believe, in the net rankings. And they're a 4 seed.
And a 4 seed who has to go out west.
Yes. Plenty of examples across the board of how the committee will have the bracket already filled out, really. And you adjust what would be a 5-12 into a 4 seed in a matchup that kind of sets up regionally the way they want. I think by and large, by a large percentage, every year, they don't even have to see the results of these games.
Mm-mm.
The Auburn game yesterday did not matter when it came to the committee's bracket. And I don't understand what the hype is all about if it's more or less just it feels like we're watching a tournament in November. You know, that I want more of the atmosphere, the buzz around an impactful game. And the committee doesn't value that, even though it's not about how you start, it's how you finish, right? And I don't know how Auburn can finish any better. And they're not rewarded for it at all. A 4 seed for them is ridiculous.
It's very odd how the tournament selection committee views conference tournament results, in that they are so selective in who they're even looking at.
Yeah.
It's not even about performance for certain teams. It is for other teams. Let me give you an example right here in Nashville. I think those top teams, Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, Auburn, even Florida to an extent that was nowhere near the bubble. I think the tournament looks, especially at seeds 1 through 4, those 1 through 4 or 5 lines. Yep. When you get to the conference tournament and they say, you're locked in, you're here. Unless you go on a run and win the whole thing, if you might go from a 2 to a 1 or whatever, right? But for the most part, they're not even looking to see what those teams do.
No.
But on the flip side, Mississippi State certainly was helped. They were on the bubble, and they're not on the bubble. They're in the 8-9 game after beating Tennessee on Friday. A&M was likely not in the tourney when Nashville started in the SEC tournament.
In a typical fashion, because they don't schedule all that difficult. And
they scheduled a little bit tougher this year than in years past, but my point being, they could win their way off the bubble into it. But it doesn't matter for Auburn, who won the tourney.
Right.
So I understand the frustration. I saw Stephen Pearl go on our Friends with the Next Round live down in Birmingham, and he just went ape on the entire selection committee and said, why even play this tournament? Why even do it?
Yeah.
You know, if we're still going to be a 4 seed and go out west, it's ridiculous. And had some choice words for the committee on that.
For a conference that had 8 teams in.
Rick Barnes, 2 or 3 years ago, I think 2 years ago when Tennessee won the SEC tournament, said the same thing. I think they didn't move from the 3 line to the 2 line in doing that. And he said afterward, boy, if I'd have known this, we should have lost on Friday and let someone else from our conference win their way in. If it wasn't going to affect us at all, we could have used the rest. If it wasn't going to affect our NCAA tournament seeding at all. So we've seen complaints like this before in the past, but it does seem to me that it's very selective, that the committee almost just throws their hands up and says, these top teams are already locked in. Let's not mess with them anymore. But we're still looking at these teams around the bubble so they can do some damage and work their way off that bubble in this tournament.
But here's the other thing, too. Tennessee's a good example in this bracket. There's no doubt that they had already pre-selected the Tennessee-Texas matchup for round 2.
Oh, yeah.
No question about it.
Rick Barnes joked and said, I knew it was going to be Texas or Clemson, one of his 2 former schools. Knowing how they do things with the NCAA selection committee.
It didn't really matter what result would have taken place there.
Yeah.
Because Texas is the 7th seed. They made it work, right?
By the way, I think Texas would have been an 8 seed had Tennessee moved up to a 1.
Okay.
And they still would have had the second round matchup.
Right. You just flip it the way you want in the region that you're trying to produce a good basketball game.
Well, there are so many examples of the sense of humor of the selection committee.
Coach versus coach.
There's no one. The one that is just in lockstep, and I've not heard many people discuss this, that it's like the men's selection committee and the women's selection committee got together, shook hands, and said, let's form this cruel joke on these 2 programs. Nebraska is playing Texas A&M in both tournaments after Trev Alberts left for A&M from Nebraska. Is that a coincidence?
Absolutely not.
I mean, come on. That is the funniest thing that I've seen with both teams playing each other in both the men's and women's tournament.
And then you have the dynamic of how they set up a coaching match. You have Mark Few against Will Wade.
Yeah.
Just the differences between those 2 and how that will play out. I scratch my head sometimes, Chad, because I want the week prior to Selection Sunday to mean more than what it does. It means a lot to the teams that are making a run on the bubble. You mentioned A&M and Mississippi State. But South Carolina, did it really matter for Florida? They also played well.
It really does feel like...
It did not play a factor in what the committee did for them.
And it really does feel like we make jokes about the NFL being scripted, but I feel like the committee, they're trying to do their best and get it mostly right. But it's like they get to a point and they say, here's where we think the seed lines are with each team.
Right.
Now, let's bring in the script writers. Let's bring in our writing team that knows all the storylines and give us what we're missing out on. If we just moved a team up 1 spot or down 1 spot or moved this team from east to west or this team from the Midwest to the South, what are the potential second-round matchups we're missing out on? What's the right 2-15 matchup? Oh, I don't know. Tennessee and St. Peter's features 2 brothers going head-to-head and Zakai Ziegler versus his brother. So if Tennessee was going to play another 15 seed, maybe move St. Peter's against Tennessee.
And the last time they were 15.
They beat Kentucky 2 years ago. But you can just move these little lines around and think, okay, let's bring the writing team in.
Yes.
All right, who's got all the stories? Seth Davis, come on in to the selection process. Seth Davis immediately jumping in. Hey, guys, something to watch here. These 2 coaches hate each other. That could match up in the second round. I'm thinking Seth Davis is probably in on the selection process because they need the storyline guy. Let's bring the narrative dude in to tell us what we're missing out on. This bracket is not a coincidence when you see some of the matchups that are going to happen. And Tennessee and Texas possibly in the round of 32 is the most predictable one.
Yes, you're right.
Going with Rick Barnes and with Tennessee and Texas, the whole storyline for it. That is made for, if that's the matchup, that is your 12-15 kickoff on CBS on Saturday.
You hear the theme now.
2 teams, da-da-da-da. Sorry, I didn't do the whole thing. Don't cut us off. But that is exactly what you're going to get in that exclusive window. Those first 2 games are an exclusive window. That's going to be one of them. I guarantee you, if both teams get to that point.
Chad, we
could do the writing for them, Hutton.
Yeah, we could.
We could have matched up Nebraska and A&M and said, Trev Alberts. This is the Trev Alberts Bowl.
We've also filled out our brackets as if these games have already been played.
Yeah.
I know you do yours by hand.
Stone cold.
You go get were you able to get Jonathan Stone was his name? Were you able to get the newspaper with the bracket? Or did they not do that now?
I bought a newspaper.
Did AI screw that up?
Gannett continues to just screw things up. I don't even know if it's in there, but I looked at the USA Today. There's something in the local Gannett paper, but the capsules.
Yes.
No free plugs, but I'm going to give one right now anyways. The best capsule formulation I've seen is The Athletic. That does a terrific job with their capsules. I highly recommend, if you subscribe, to go there because they have every team broken down. That's perfect, just the way Gannett and USA Today used to do before they started sucking. But I don't think that's in the paper now. That was a rite of passage for me. to run out, get the USA Today, get those team capsules, get the bracket, take out my trusty number 2 pencil, and write it in. But instead, I just printed one offline and did it with the pencil anyways.
Well, you have one that you've advanced already, right?
Yeah.
You have an upset. What's your biggest upset?
I've got James Madison in the Sweet 16.
Okay.
My biggest numerical upset is Samford over Kansas, 13-4. I do not think – I don't have a 14, 15, or 16 winning in round 1, which will happen, right? I believe that will happen. I just don't have one I feel good enough about to pick.
Some of these schools that you'll watch on the championship games, and that's it. It gets locked in my head for my upsets. We're all experts now because we watched the final 8 minutes of a second half. When I say we're all, that includes me, Chad, everyone. Yeah. The upset that I know you're high on is Rock Chalk Jayhawk not lasting very long.
Well, I laugh right now that this is where we're all experts, right? I was picking on Seth Davis earlier, who I think mostly does a good job.
He does.
But, I mean, immediately that guy's chiming in. Like, hey, this team right here, they got to start 5 seniors, and they shoot 42% from 3, and watch out for this matchup right here. Everybody becomes – Seth Davis actually knows because I think he does this all year and he watches the games. Everyone, though, becomes Seth Davis this time of year, where suddenly –
social media hates everything.
Your buddy that you meet up with at the local bar – knows way too much about St. Peter's, South Dakota State, Vermont, because they caught 5 minutes of a game or because they read a capsule today, and suddenly they are all in on these teams. And, I mean, they're breaking it down like Zach Galifianakis in The Hangover with algorithms above their head, and they've got it locked in. Hey, I've been following this program for going on 3 years now. In Colgate, I'm telling you, the way they run their defense, they trap guys, and they're going to get all over Baylor, and they're going to – I'm just making this up, by the way. Right. But your friend at the bar is probably making it up too. Don't trust them. Don't trust any of them. I also love it. So don't be fooled by your buddy who's going to act like he's actually watched all these teams in the tournament that no one watches throughout the regular season. I give you that warning while also telling you why I love Samford to knock off Kansas. Right. And I've seen exactly 1 1/2 of basketball of Samford. And I watched them win their conference championship game. Buckyball. Their head coach deploys this fast break, trapping, full court press style of basketball. Kansas, they got the horses to get it done, but those horses need to be injury-free. Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough, both are battling injury problems. The big man dislocated his shoulder, missed the Big 12 tournament. And McCullough's been battling a bone bruise now for, I think, 5 games he's missed since mid to late February, and he's sort of off and on. So I do like Samford as my upset pick. Buyer beware, again, from someone who's not going to sit here and tell you that he spent a lot of time watching Samford Bulldog basketball, but I do like Samford over Kansas in round 1.
Let's go ahead and advance them. Why don't we?
Let's do it. I moved him over with my number 2 pencil.
What the biggest takeaways for me? Let's just start. We'll dive even further with Dan Dockage, but the East bracket. Let's start with the East region. Not an easy second round game if Florida Atlantic advances, just based on their veteran roster. And I think it does matter that they're back at the Barclays Center. They're back in New York, where they started to make their run through the Sweet 16. I think that does play a factor in the mentality of how they went to the Final Four.
Yeah, same airport, different building, right? They were in Madison Square Garden last year.
And that's me not factoring in that they could lose to Northwestern. But UConn FAU is fascinating in round 2.
All those 8-9 games are going to be very difficult to pick. And I had a hard time with FAU or Northwestern. Northwestern tied for 3rd in the Big Ten. Very underrated team. Very good season all year. I've got FAU advancing. I think there's far too much love for UConn. The red flag meter goes off. We talked about this with Caleb Williams, and the red flag meter goes off. Whenever everyone is picking one team, and I mean everyone, I think everyone on the CBS selection show, I think 75% of the analysts on ESPN's bracketology, I think others that I've read, I'm going to say between 70 and 80% of all analysts have UConn winning it all, maybe more than that. I'm worried for UConn, and I love UConn. I think UConn is the best team after the regular season going into this tournament. But because of that, I don't have them getting out of the Sweet 16. I've got Auburn advancing past UConn
Auburn
in the Sweet 16.
Just off for greatness after, playing a great game throughout the tournament, but yesterday just took over the matchup against
the last
Florida.
time Auburn went on a run and won the SEC tournament, that was also the year they went to the Final Four.
So they have to head to Spokane. They've got Yale, big guards. Apparently, Yale is skilled. Chad, that's what you'll hear about this team.
Oh, let me tell you about Yale. I'm an expert on them, too, because
Yeah.
I watched them yesterday morning in the Ivy League Championship. Brown should have beat their ass in that game. They had them beat.
Oh, but the Ivy's much better.
Brown was up 7 points with like 2 minutes left, and Yale finally started hitting shots and knocked down some threes. But they somehow, I don't know how they had time to do it, but Yale dishes it off with like 1.8 seconds left, and a guy just kind of puts a little half shot up towards the rim right underneath the goal. Money at the buzzer. Yale advances on a buzzer beater yesterday. Thrilling conclusion. Yale was one of the 2 best teams in the Ivy all season. I think Cornell, there's 3 really good ones. Cornell, Princeton, Yale. Brown got hot late, had a losing record, almost won the Ivy to be a big upset situation from the Ivy League. Instead, Yale advances. Yale's a good team. They're not going to compete with Auburn.
No,
that's my guess.
They shouldn't. I think Illinois has a pretty good draw in this region. And this region, by the way, features 3 of the 4 Final Four teams from a year ago, with San Diego State also being represented.
Hutton, I think that Illinois has such a good draw that I've got them going all the way to the Final Four and being the representative out of this. Maybe this is recency bias with me, watching Terrence Shannon Jr.
Okay.
and that Illinois team all weekend winning the Big Ten championship. But I really like Illinois. And if someone's going to get out of that region and it's not going to be UConn, I like the Illini.
Apparently, the state of Washington is massive fans of the state of Alabama. The 3 teams from the state, UAB, Alabama, and Auburn, all playing at that same venue. They're all making that flight.
Is this some sort of like tourism cross promotion?
I don't know.
Is Washington trying to appeal to more visitors from the state of Alabama?
I would hate that if I'm just a casual fan trying to go to the arena.
Did they find something in their statistics that not enough people from the Deep South travel to Washington to vacation? And they thought, we need to expose to the Northwest Alabamians. We need to get them up here to make sure they see the natural beauty of the Apple State. So the one way to do that is to get all the Alabama schools in the NCAA tournament up to the state of Washington so they can finally partake in this majestic scene that is the Pacific Northwest.
Plenty of storylines
like
at
an
the
episode
bottom
of Twin
half
Peaks.
of this region. But yeah, I'm with you, Chad. I think Illinois with a pretty good draw here. In the South, I think the South may be the toughest region. Plenty of things to point to with this. A&M, a tough matchup, period. They've got Houston potentially in round 2. I believe, going back to how teams are, what seed, what line they're on, most in the predictions had A&M as a 10 seed. They end up with the 9.
Yeah.
So now they're now moving towards the number 1 overall seed. Kentucky has the 3. This is another 3 seed with a great draw. Coach Cal, normally he's going to complain about Kentucky's draw. It is hard to complain about their path right now. And he's from Pittsburgh. He's playing in Pittsburgh, coaching in Pittsburgh. He's going back to his hometown. And Chad, I don't know if you agree or not, but this is not some tough path to the Sweet 16 or beyond for the Wildcats.
I got Kentucky in the Final Four. You've hit on 2 of mine right now that I think they have the best path.
It's not difficult at all.
I mean, Oakland is a good program under Greg Kampe, who's been there forever. But Kentucky's a lot better. Kentucky's one of those teams that when they're shooting the way they did in Knoxville a couple weeks ago, no one's going to beat them, regardless of how they're defending. And they're capable of that with their offensive players. They got legit NBA dudes up and down that roster that can score it. So I really like Kentucky. I like their matchup possibly with Texas Tech or NC State in round 2. Marquette's banged up. Tyler Kolek, their great player, injured, not going to play in the tournament. So very favorable path possibly to the Final Four for the Wildcats.
Yeah, and then they potentially go matchup potentially against Houston. But, that's a matchup where Kentucky can shoot the lights out, and Houston's banged up too.
Yeah.
Let's see. Midwest.
So the Midwest is the best region based on when you add up all the national seeds, right? They do this mathematically.
Oh, like the 1 through
lowest,
68.
yeah, it's like a golf score. They take the national seeds and add them all up. And when you do that in the Midwest, I think they've got the South by a couple of points where they're actually the toughest by national seed region.
Gonzaga is going to be playing in Salt Lake. Again, Mark Few against Will Wade there. Purdue's the number 1 seed here. I'm curious to see how tight they play based on expectation. Not even necessarily in round 1. Because they'll be ready to go after the play-in game is over on Tuesday. But I'm thinking, Chad, this is set up for Purdue and Kentucky in the Final Four.
I'm curious to see how tight they play from an officiating standpoint.
Because I think they're playing TCU or
Purdue. Yeah,
no.
They got Utah State or TCU
okay.
in round 2. I'm curious to see how tight they call it with Purdue, because it is very difficult to officiate Zach Edey. And are they going to let it go? And when they let it go, he's usually even better because he can just knock people over and get to the basket. Is he going to get in foul trouble because he gets an officiating crew that's whistle happy and wanting to call offensive fouls anytime he moves to the basket?
Yeah.
That's going to be a big factor for Purdue and really for all these teams, is how each game is officiated and the team that does a better job adjusting to how the game is being officiated. I love Purdue. They're my national champion. I've said it for a month and a half.
Them as well.
I think that they're Virginia all over again. They lost to a 16 a year ago. They're going to be motivated. They come back this year. I think they cut down the nets in Phoenix.
So bottom half of the bracket, South Carolina, who's had a good year, they draw Dana Altman. That's a tough coaching matchup.
Yeah.
For the Gamecocks against the Oregon Ducks. Creighton, who has been on a run recently, they get the winner of South Carolina, Oregon. South Carolina's got a tough draw there based on what they're seeding here as a 6th seed. And then there's Tennessee with a lot of expectation, but have lost 2 straight. Now, they started slow in both losses against Kentucky and then out of the gate in the SEC tournament against Mississippi State. They did not fight back in the way they did against Kentucky and make that a game. Point being, get past St. Peter's, and there's probably a Texas team staring at you. And if not that, Colorado State and Virginia would be the other 2. And then they could match up against Creighton. There's a lot of different variables there for a team that is expected to do some things beyond just the first weekend.
Yeah, Nafali Dante for Oregon was 12 for 12 from the floor in the Pac-12 championship game.
Wow.
Got to watch their matchup against South Carolina. I think Tennessee achieved to their ceiling this year as a basketball team. I think they're very talented. They've got all the ingredients of a team that could cut down the nets and win the national championship. I think they've achieved to their level and their ceiling throughout the year to win the SEC regular season. If they can continue on that path and just play good Tennessee basketball the way this team is capable of doing, they're going to go on a deep March run. If they play anything like they did against Mississippi State, and I take the Kentucky game kind of out of it because I don't think Tennessee played that poorly in a close loss at home because Kentucky was on fire. But they're going to get knocked out early. And that second-round matchup with Texas screams the same type of vibes I got from Juwan Howard in Michigan squeaking into the tournament a few years back and knocking off a really good Tennessee team in round 2 as an 11 seed, because Texas has underachieved greatly this year. To even be in a 7-10 matchup, that is a team with a talent to be a top 4 seed. Nationally, that's a 7 or a 10. So round 2, again, the committee being very tricky with how they're matching up Rick Barnes with Texas in round 2. I think that'll be a very tough challenge for Tennessee if those 2 teams match up in round 2.
And then in the West, final region, North Carolina gets the 1 seed. Mississippi State and Michigan State as the 8-9. Izzo's in the tournament. Pitino's not. Izzo's in the tournament. He gets in here. St. Mary's against Grand Canyon in a 5-12. Chad, tell me about Grand Canyon. You've talked about them for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Grand Canyon, they've sort of taken over for New Mexico State in the WAC. New Mexico State for years would win that conference and go in the tournament, and they were always a trendy 12-over-5 upset pick, and they didn't really do it. One time, I think they got UConn one year as a 12-over-5. Chris Jans, going back to Mississippi State, Michigan State, was that tough defensive-minded coach for New Mexico State for many of those trips to the tournament. Now he's coaching Mississippi State against another tough defensive-minded team in Michigan State. That is a difficult one to pick for 2 teams that are going to absolutely get after each other in that game with Izzo and Chris Jans going head-to-head. Grand Canyon, though, they've got the WAC player of the year. They're a very high-scoring team. They've got, I think, 3 big-time transfers that came in and have really helped Bryce Drew. Bryce Drew does not have a good NCAA tournament track record. He's lost some nail biters and some heartbreakers once he gets to the tournament. But I like Grand Canyon. I think that's a 12 over 5. I'm going to pick. St. Mary's is very good. St. Mary's, though, has not been great down the stretch. Lost to Gonzaga in that West Coast Conference Championship game. I'm going to go Grand Canyon in the upset.
I'm going Charleston over Bama. Having seen very inconsistent play from Alabama. Is Mark Sears show up? If he's not, and a lot of this can be just do you knock down shots or not. But Charleston is 27-7 on the year. And this is an Alabama team that, lost 11 games, 12 games?
Charleston's one of those teams, almost like Vermont, or teams you see every year in the tournament.
Yeah.
That it's always the best program in their conference or right there towards the top. So you kind of take them for granted. That's not an easy matchup for Alabama.
I don't think
you're
so.
right.
And again, they're just very inconsistent. They don't play defense. I think that comes back to bite them early in this tournament. New Mexico against Clemson. I think New Mexico can win that game. You also have Nevada as a 10 seed against Dayton, when I think many would have had it flipped. They'd have the Nevada as the 7, not the 10, and they are knocked down. And that was really, I mean, the Mountain West did not get much respect in regards to the media and fan reaction, because you have Nevada and Colorado State to point to as feeling undervalued based on where they are seed-wise and what's to come down the stretch if they were to advance. So you have New Mexico against Clemson, potentially, if you go to the 7-10, it sets up for Nevada against Arizona, for instance.
Well, they should love the respect and attention they got in the Mountain West from the committee, because they got as many entries as the Big Ten did with 6 into the tournament, which is a great testament to that conference. So even if some of their teams might be a little bit underseeded, getting 6 teams in when the Big East got 3 is quite the accomplishment for the Mountain West. New Mexico's best player, Hutton, his name is Nelly Jr. Joseph. I've got New Mexico winning 1 game. I'm considering getting them to the Sweet 16 just based off that guy's name.
The baller.
That sounds like a March Madness darling that we're going to be talking about.
Only San Diego State does. Only San Diego State, which is a 5 seed, was seeded higher than an 8 seed in this tournament of the 6 teams.
And San Diego State, the defending national runner-up from last year.
That's over in the in the East bracket there. Colorado State, Boise State, among the last 4 teams in. It's interesting too, because I think that's what the Big East is saying. They're just comparing, hearing the coaches. It's like, hey, we should have had 6 in, and they're staring down the Mountain West. That are among the last 2 of them are among the last 4 in, and meanwhile, they're sitting around going, where are our East Coast brands? And the fact that you have a Providence and Seton Hall and St. John's not in, most of the media coverage is going to be from that area.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Big East love.
Well, it's one year that you can actually talk about East Coast bias, so that's a nice thing.
There you go.
Nice change of pace. No New York bias in this bracket.